basically on the side of Hidden Mountain near Los Lunas, New Mexico, that has an ancient inscription on it carved into the side panel of the boulder. This boulder is out of basalt. It's about 80 tons. And this inscription is actually in Paleo-Hebrew. Now, that's very interesting, Laurel, because Paleo-Hebrew went out of favor around 500 BC. And the Hebrew actually changed formats into what we know as the modern block Hebrew, which is still used today. So when you see modern Hebrew, that's actually what you're seeing. Paleo-Hebrew is an ancient form of Hebrew, and it's basically written in character style letters. There's no vowels; all the vowels are inferred. But we can go back and look at other ancient inscriptions that are written in Paleo-Hebrew, and to understand that, okay, this is indeed what this is. The Phoenicians actually used Paleo-Hebrew, and so basically this is a real controversial stone, in that some claim that this inscription is pre-Columbian. In other words, before the time of Columbus in 1491, 1492, and therefore may be proof of early Semitic contact with the North Americas. So that's where this whole thing really gets interesting, because if that's true, that writing shouldn't be out there. And so what exactly is this, and why is it there? And those are questions we went out to seek to answer.
Well, when did someone stumble on this? I mean, obviously stumble is a bad term because it's literally in the middle of the back country and not that easy to find. When did someone first become aware of this, Aaron?
Well, the first recorded mention of the stone is in 1933. A professor, Dr. Frank Hibben, he was an archaeologist from the University of New Mexico, and he was led out there by an unnamed Indian guide who claimed to have found it when he was a boy in the 1880s. Now, this is 1933. Dr. Hibben went out to look at it. But before that, it's interesting that that also in the 1800s, that someone had found it, and basically, now there's no written documentation on this, but it was claimed that a man who lived in the area of Los Lunas, he was a resident, he said his grandfather had seen this stone way back in the 1800s, predating the 1880s date. So there's at least verbal confirmation that people had seen it, but written documentation was about 1933 when Professor Hibben went out. And he was one of the first ones to really kind of take a crack at what this thing was. He recognized it as being Paleo-Hebrew, but didn't really quite get the translation of the stone. He wasn't able to really nail it down. He was really unsure about what this thing was, and it just basically went unstudied. For years, basically. So the man who found it back in the 1800s, his name was Simon Cerna, and he was born in 1829, and he said his father had seen the rock in 1800. So we're going back quite a ways, but Professor Hibben went out there to look at it, and it basically went unnoticed, for the most part, unrecognized and understudied for years and years, up until about the mid-1940s. And Dr. Pfeiffer, who was an authority on the Old Testament for Harvard University, and there was a man who went out in 1948 who lived in Albuquerque. He was a resident out there, and he took an interest in the rock. He had heard about it, and he went out there to take photographs to send it to Dr. Pfeiffer. But what we know, what he did was something very damaging. As just an amateur, he wanted to get a really good photograph, Laurel. So what he did was he took and scratched out the inscription on this basalt rock that is, that's volcanic in nature. It's had this dark patina, which is a desert varnish over the rock. And even Professor Hibben said in 1933, when he first visited the rock, now I didn't know this initially, but I verified it through firsthand information who had known Dr. Hibben when he was still alive. And he asked Dr. Hibben about this stone, the mystery stone, the Decalogue stone. And he said, tell me about what you saw. And Professor Hibben told him, he said, when I saw it in 1933, it had the desert patina covering the inscription. Not only that, but it had lichen, which is a little biological material that's over. It's like a club moss that grows over the rock. It had lichen growing over the inscription as well. Now, if that's true, which I don't doubt, that means that inscription's old, because to get desert patina over rock and to get lichen growing on rock, it takes a long time. That shows antiquity, and we know that through science you can go back and say it takes X number of years for this desert varnish to be over this rock and this lichen to grow over it. But what this man did, William McCart, in 1948, he scratched out the inscription so he could get a better photograph. And basically what that does, when you scratch over the desert varnish, it becomes a lighter color, basically white, like a chalk, if you will.
Like a high contrast, right?
Yeah, that's what he did. He actually contrasted it, and he scratched out this inscription with whatever it was, and basically removed all the patina and lichen on the stone. Now, when he did that, it damaged the stone forever, because you can't get that information back. It destroys vital information that's important to the context in archaeology. And without context in archaeology, you really can't answer a lot of questions which, science seeks to answer. And so he basically destroyed the context of the stone. But when he did, he sent this picture over to Dr. Pfeiffer, and he was really the first one who translated the inscription and verified from, as Dr. Hibben had initially claimed, it was Paleo-Hebrew, and he actually translated it. Now, there's only probably a handful of people in the world who can read, write, and understand Paleo-Hebrew language. It's just a language that's not used anymore. And so Dr. Pfeiffer translated the stone as the Decalogue stone, the abridged version of the Ten Commandments.
This is where it really gets interesting to me, because I in getting ready to talk to you, I had done quite a bit of reading on the different possibilities of interpretations, like could it be Phoenician and could it be Samaritan versus Paleo-Hebrew, and then the possibility that maybe it could have something to do with the Mormon battalion marching through southern Utah down in that area. Why don't you say, now let me ask you something first. Can you estimate, just really rough ballpark, the elevation of this stone, where it's sitting in this mountain?
Okay, the elevation.
Because I know Albuquerque is like about a mile up, right? Isn't it? It's close to a mile.
Yeah, it's about 6,500 feet. This is, I'm trying to remember, because I took an elevation last time I was out there. It was just not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, actually. I think the elevation is right around 6,700 feet, but I'm just going off memory. But it is quite high. It's
and it's sitting out right in the middle of the desert.
It is. It's high desert. This
little range of mountains.
Yes, and it's tucked away back in there. The stone is not in its original location. At some point in time, that 80-ton boulder, I think, was near the top of the mountain at some point, and it fell either, due to erosion or gravity or an earthquake. I don't really know, but something caused it to shake loose from its original position and roll most of the way down the mountain. Now, the reason I say that is because the inscription is written in very neatly in parallel, uniform lines, but it's written at an angle where it would be very difficult to chisel out, letters sideways on a stone. I think it was done when the stone was up near the top and in a horizontal position where they did it, at a reachable height where they did it horizontally, and then the stone fell, and it happened to fall on its side with the translation at an angle. Had that stone fell the other way, Laurel, and landed,
we wouldn't even know about it.
You wouldn't even know about it because it'd totally be on the bottom. And people ask, well, why don't they just move the stone in a museum? That's
an
easier.
8-ton boulder.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way no one can do that. Get up in there and do that. No one is going to take the time, effort, and money to do that. So, unfortunately, as you said earlier on, because of that, and because it's remote and it's virtually unprotected, there has been some damage to the stone. Sometime prior to 2007, probably in 2006, one of the first lines of the stone, is actually the very first line of the stone, somehow was vandalized, probably with some kind of a battery power tool grinder. And they just ground off that first line. There's no electricity up there, so you had to have some kind of a portable, way to do that. But it looks like they were in the process of grounding that first line off. We actually have that first line documented with photos, and there's been plenty of evidence to verify the condition of the stone prior to that. But unfortunately, it was damaged from 2006 or 2007, and it's just a devastating thing because when people scratch out patina, they deface an archaeological artifact. Number one, they're erasing the context and vital information for archaeologists to study. And two, some of those questions may never be answered now because of the damage that's done, and it's just unrepairable. So it's a terrible thing when I come across that. That's just one of my pet peeves. When I come across something like that, you just, it's been out there, and then someone comes along and is ready to study the thing, and then now there's damage to it that's unrepairable because some person went out there and just damaged the thing on purpose. It's heartbreaking when you're an archaeologist because those are things that you need, and now you don't have those things anymore. But we're working with what we have, and of course the documentation before the vandalization. So we're quite aware of what this whole translation was about.
Well, of course, taking my little Sears Craftsman grinding tool with me to a remote site and trying to deface what looks like almost a petroglyph, but it's Paleo Hebrew. It's not petroglyph symbols. That is going to be the last thing on my mind when I go to New Mexico.